Good evening. This is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Carrots. Today is the 16th of November 2016. We've just concluded our live Wednesday evening Bible study, at which time, as we usually do, we made a recording of the session. Lovely video, no sound. So we had done 4 chapters in something like 50 minutes. So I'm going to try to recreate that, maybe even shave off a few minutes. In our last lesson, we were talking about Melchizedek. And so now we're in the 15th chapter of Genesis. And after these events, the dealings with Melchizedek, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. He told him not to be afraid. And this has to do with the Abrahamic covenant, the legal agreement God is going to make with Abram and later with some of his descendants. And he said, "What can you give me, Lord, for I'm childless? How do you take a man who has no children, 0 children, and give him many descendants?" He mentioned, he talks about the heir to his house, since he had, like, I have no family. I have no heirs. I could give my property to whoever I want to, leave it to. But there's nobody who is presumed to be my heir, since there are no children to leave it to. Abram said, "Look, you've given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir." Now, the word of the Lord came to him. This is what the Lord tells him. "This will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir." He took him outside and he said, "Look at the sky. Your offspring will be as numerous as the stars that you see." Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. We see this so much about Abraham in the Old Testament. God said something, Abraham believed it, he accepted it, and it was counted to him as righteousness. He also said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess." And then he had him bring some animals, and they offered a sacrifice. And in verse 13 of chapter 15, he says, "Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain." He's talking about the Jews now. "Your offspring will be strangers in a land that does not belong to them." It will eventually. They will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. This is prophetic. They would be for slightly over 400 years slaves in Egypt. "However, I will judge the nation they serve." So the way that the Egyptians treated them would bring about God's treatment of the Egyptians. "And afterwards, they will go out with many possessions." You've heard me mention this before, and I'm going to hold the details off until we get to the book of Exodus. But you know that when Moses went up on the mountain and God gave him not only the commandments and the law, but details on how to build the tabernacle and the high priest's clothing Now they were out in a desert place when the tabernacle was built. The tabernacle had a great deal of gold and silver in it. The breastplate that the high priest wore had 12 precious jewels, 2 more on the shoulders of the breastplate. Where did all of this come from? They had been slaves. Well, we'll talk about it when we get there. It's something for us to look forward to. I'm going to leave it at that for right now. He says, they will go out of Egypt with many possessions, and they did. But you will go to your fathers. When they died, they referred to them as going to their fathers or in Abraham's bosom or going to be with their family. They're speaking about death. He says, you will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. And wow, did that ever come true? In the 4th generation, they will return here. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the 4th generation. They will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites had not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set and it was dark, and it goes on to talk about the animal sacrifice that they had done. It said, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, I give this land to your offspring. Now, this is something that I'll have to show you. I don't have it ready. I was looking at one earlier today, a map of Israel, where the cities are known, the places are known by the way they are here. In the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Well, let's go on now. We're in chapter 16. At this time, Abraham has 0 children. Sarah, his wife, who is 10 years younger than him, 0 children. Abraham's wife gets the idea, and we've talked about this before. She has a slave, and I sometimes explain that these birds of mine, the one that's on my shoulder right now, is the mother of the other 2 that are wandering around here. Now, because she's my bird, my possession, my legal property, any offspring that she has are mine to sell, to keep, to give away, to do with whatever I want to, because she's mine. Therefore, her offspring are my possession also. Remember, her maid was an Egyptian slave. Any children that she would have would be the property of the person who owned her. So she said, perhaps my slave can have children. And so Abraham slept with her. The moment she became pregnant, she looked down on her mistress, whose slave she was. Because in those days, I think it's in most women, but to be a mother was that all you could hope for, all you would want. And Sarah or Sarai, her name hasn't been changed yet, is already dealing with the fact that she's barren. But now she's got a slave who is looking down on her because she's pregnant, even though she's pregnant by her mistress's husband. I lost my place. Sarai came to Abraham and she said, now this was her idea, but she's still blaming him. I mean, don't we do that, ladies? Sarah goes to Abram and said, you're responsible for my sufferings. I put my slave in your arms, and ever since she saw that she was pregnant, she's looked down on me. May the Lord judge between me and you. Well, let's see who's at fault. Abram replied to Sarah, she's your slave. You decide what you want to do with her. So Sarai mistreated her slave, who was mistreating her. But now the shoe's on the other foot, and the slave runs away. And the angel of the Lord finds her by a spring of water in the wilderness. And she said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, you must go back to your mistress and submit to her mistreatment. See, God had a plan. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring, and they will be too many to count. Now, it's already been promised that Abraham's offspring through Sarai or Sarah will be too numerous to count. But now the angel is making a promise to the mistress, Hagar. Your offspring will be too numerous to count. And the angel of the Lord said to her, here's some details. This is prophetic. You have conceived and will have a son. You will name him Ishmael. Another occasion where the child's name is given long before he's conceived or born. For the Lord has heard your cry of affliction. This man will be like a wild ass. This is the Holman Christian Standard Bible. Like a donkey, a wild man. His hand will be against everyone. The child you're going to bear. This is an Egyptian woman pregnant by the Jew, Abraham. His offspring, whose name we know now is Ishmael, or will be Ishmael. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live at odds with all his brothers. He's not even born yet. His father has no children. So he has yet no brothers. But the Arab offspring of the Egyptian maid and Abraham will be at odds with a lot of people, but especially his brothers, not yet conceived, not yet born, the offspring of Sarah and Abraham, the Jewish nation. So she named the Lord who spoke with her, the God who sees. She just gave him that name. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, And Abram gave him the name Ishmael to the son Hagar had. Now, at this time, when Ishmael is born, Abraham is 86 years old. Sarah is 76. Abraham is 86. Keep that in mind because it will give us the age of Ishmael when his mother and Ishmael leave the premises for good. Now, we're at chapter 17. Now, some years have gone by, and Abram is 99. In the previous chapter, I said he was 86 when Ishmael was born. So now Ishmael is 13 years old. Abram is 99 years old. Sarah, who has not yet conceived a child, is 89 years old. And the Lord appeared to him, saying, I am God Almighty. Live in my presence and be devout. I will establish my covenant, my legal agreement between me, says God, and you, and I will multiply you greatly. Well, he has a 13-year-old son who's going to be the father of a great nation. He's going to be a wild man and be at odds with his brothers. Then Abram fell to the ground, and God spoke to him. As for me, my covenant is with you, says God to Abram. And you will be the father of many nations, not a nation, many nations. You will be the father of a nation with your wife Sarai. And you will be the father of a nation of Arabs with her handmaid Hagar, an Egyptian woman. Your name will no longer be Abram, but your name will be Abraham, and I will make you the father of many nations, and I will make you extremely fruitful. Wait till we get to the end of his life. You ain't seen nothing yet. I will make you extremely fruitful and will make nations and kings come from you. I will keep my covenant, my agreement, between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. He makes a separate agreement with Isaac. He makes another agreement with Jacob, and so forth. But this is how he starts with his covenant with Abraham, known as the Abrahamic or Abrahamic covenant. I will keep my commandment between you and me and your offspring after you throughout the generations as an everlasting covenant to be your God and the God of your offspring after you. And you and your offspring, I will give this land where you're residing, where you're living right now in Canaan. This is yours as an eternal possession, and I will be their God. This is when the contract for the real estate known as Israel comes about. As for you and your offspring, throughout their generations, you keep my covenant. Every one of your males, this is a sign of the covenant now, every male will be circumcised. You must circumcise the flesh of the foreskin, to serve as a sign of the covenant between me and you. Every time a bris is performed on a Jewish baby boy, it's a sign of the covenant, the legal agreement that God made with Abraham. Every bris that is performed on a Jewish baby boy, 8 days old. Throughout your generations, every male among you at 8 days old will be circumcised. This is a slave born in your house. He happens to be staying there because he has nowhere else to stay. At 8 days, he will be circumcised. If you buy him with money from a foreigner, somebody who's not Jewish, and you buy the child, a slave, male, 8 days, circumcised. The one who is not your offspring, a slave born in your house as well, or one purchased with money, must be circumcised. My covenant will be your flesh as an everlasting covenant. If any male is not circumcised, that man will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. As for your wife Sarai, don't call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her, and she will produce nations. Kings of people will come from her. He's 99. She's 89 and barren. Abraham fell to the ground, laughed, and thought in his heart, can a child be born to a 100-year-old man? Because he's 99. If she were to be pregnant the next day, still got a year to go before he's born, and he would be 100. Can Sarah, a 90-year-old woman, give birth? So Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael could live in your presence. God, could we just end it here? I've got one son. His name's Ishmael. Okay, so his mother is my wife's slave, but he is my son. But God said, no. Your wife Sarah will bear you a son. Here we go again. And his name will be Isaac. I will confirm my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I'll certainly bless him. Well, that promise was already made to Ishmael's mother. He will father. As for Ishmael, I will make him fruitful and will multiply him greatly. He will father 12 tribal leaders, and I will make him your son by the Egyptian handmaid, also into a great nation. But I will confirm my covenant with Isaac. Yes, the other one is your son. And I will do right by him. But we're talking about my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. When he finished talking with him, God withdrew from Abraham. Abraham was 99 years old, and he circumcised his 13-year-old son, Ishmael, and he, at age 99, was circumcised. And all the men in his household slaves born in the house and those that were purchased with his money from a foreigner. They were all circumcised. And now we come to chapter 18. 3 men come to visit Abraham. Remember when Abraham had just been victor in a war and he paid tithes to Melchizedek? Remember when he went by, Melchizedek offered him bread and wine and so forth, and before he paid him tithes off of what he had gained in that battle? Well, similarly, Abraham is now, it's hot. He's sitting out under a tree, trying to cool off. And he looks up and he sees 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the entrance of his tent to meet them, and he bowed to the ground. And he said, "My Lord, if I found favor in your sight, please do not go on past your servant. Wait here. Don't continue on your way. Have a little water brought to you. You can wash your feet. You can rest under the tree. And I will bring you bread to strengthen yourself. And then you can continue on your way." So they said, "As you say." Abram went to the tent. He told Sarah, "Quick, make some bread." And he ran to the herd and he got a calf and he gave it to a young man to prepare it. And Abraham took curds and milk and the calf and he set them before the men and they ate, sitting under a tree. Now they converse. Sarah's in the kitchen, but she's listening. One of them says in verse 9, "Where's your wife Sarah?" "There in the tent," was the answer. The Lord said, "I will certainly come back to you." Now it said the Lord said. It doesn't say the man said. It said the Lord said, "I will come back to you in about a year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent. Abraham and Sarah were getting old. She was past the age of childbearing, way past the age of childbearing. She laughed. She said, "After I have shriveled up and my Lord, my husband, is old, will I have delight?" But the Lord asked Abraham, one of the 3 men, "Why did Sarah laugh? Can I really have a baby when I'm old? Is anything impossible for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will come back to see you in about a year, and you will have a son." This is what the Lord is telling Abraham. Sarah denied it. I probably would have too. Then I would try to figure out, how do I get out of the lie I just told? But we don't like to get caught in an embarrassing moment. She said, "I did not laugh," because she was afraid. But he replied, "No, you did laugh." Now, we're down to verse 16, chapter 18. Men are getting ready to go. These are angels, we're going to find out in the next chapter. They know something regarding Lot, Abraham's nephew. And they're thinking perhaps they should tell Abraham what they know. Men got up and looked out over Sodom, and Abraham was walking them off, going down to the road with them. And the Lord said, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham is to become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the Lord will be blessed through him. I've chosen him so that he will command his children and his house after him to keep the Lord's way by doing what is right and just. This is how the Lord will fulfill to Abraham what he's promised him. And then they tell Abraham where they're going and why they're going there. Verse 20. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. I will go down to see if what they had done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I will find out. The Lord says, I'm going to investigate. People have complained. I'm going to check it out. They tell Abraham. And the men turned and they went toward Sodom. And Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham stepped forward and said, will you take the righteous along with the wicked? If there's a city full of bad people, are you going to kill the good ones too? He said, what if there's 50 righteous? Will you sweep it away instead of sparing the place for the sake of 50? And God said, if there are 50 righteous men. Now, either there are or there aren't. We were discussing, as I said, I taught this lesson to my group live, but it did not record properly. Only the visual recorded, the sound did not. And there was a question about how do we know what the sin was that God was punishing them for. He's saying, you got a town full of people. If there are 50 that are righteous, he'll spare the whole town. So this means there's either 50 righteous or there aren't. $50 righteous in a whole town is not a lot of people. Then he brings it down to 45 and 40 and 30. In verse 31, he says, suppose, since I have ventured to speak for the Lord, suppose 20 are there. And he replied, I will not destroy it if there are 20. And he answered, I will not destroy it on account of 10. If there are 10 worthy people in the whole city, the city will be saved. So the fact that the city wasn't saved means there weren't even 10 righteous people. Let's see if we can discover the source of their unrighteousness. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of 10. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he departed. And Abraham returned in his place. Now I'm going to close this video here and begin another one. I have a series on homosexuality, and I don't want to repeat anything I've already made a video about. But in preparing for this lesson, something occurred to me that I have not preached before. And like with Melchizedek's, we had only a few verses in Genesis and mention in Matthew and Psalms, but a whole lot of information in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews. So there's something else I feel it's worth making another video in the area of homosexuality, and I want to do that. So I'm going to close here so that this other material can be added to the other material that I've already recorded on the same topic. So until the next video, God bless.